Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Halal Gap. With Sikandar Atiq, I am your host, Sofia Alani, and as always, we're joined by our talented producer, Asif Qureshi. Asif, where are you at?
I'm right here.
Good to know. Awesome. So we have an incredible guest joining us today. Take it away, Sikandar.
She is the current Director of School Engagement at Academic Approach Chicago and has had a highly successful career in academia, formerly as a science teacher with Chicago Public Schools and then as a professor at Northeastern University. He's the current Chief Operating Officer for the Muslim Public Affairs Council and is an experienced campaign manager, strategist, and project manager with over a decade of experience in community engagement and public affairs. Together, they are the co-creators of one of the world's best-known platforms for creative and social engagement within the Muslim community. Please welcome to the Halal Gap the co-founders of IllMuslims, Rummi and Sadaf Javaid. Woo! Welcome, guys.
So excited to be here.
Where are you guys joining us from? We already heard Sadaf is joining us from Chicago, I believe.
That is correct.
Okay, right on. Rami, where are you at, man?
I'm in the Hollywood for Families, Orlando.
Oh, I love it. You going to Disney World after or what?
Maybe, if it's in the cards, I might be signing autographs at Disney World inside the Mickey Mouse suit.
Autographs? Who did you play?
With the Illy bar.
Oh, that a boy. Right across the eyes. Perfect. Wicked. So thank you guys so much for joining us. I know this has been in the cards for like years and years and years. For those who don't know, this dynamic duo was instrumental in helping us launch Popcorn so many years ago. And you know, we've always been big fans of the work that you guys have done. So to kick things off and to introduce people to IllMuslims, I think to start, can you guys tell us a little bit more about why you thought it was a project that needed to get going and when it did? So just tell us a little bit about kind of what you were thinking around the time of launching IllMuslims. And whoever wants to take it can go.
Rummi, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can do it. So I used to manage artists, and I had an artist on tour in the States, and we were booking shows, and I remember just having, over the course of a couple of months, conversations with Sadaf about how our community doesn't support creative output. And she goes, well, define community, because she was a teacher at the time, and said that we literally just went over this in class, and community definition is divergent populations interacting in a meaningful way. And I was like, oh, we don't have one of those. So.
And what year is this?
Oh man, early 2014 or 13.
Okay.
The end of 2013, yeah.
End of 2013, and I was like, oh, we don't have one of those. And then she brought up the fact that, and again, this is me telling my version. She's gonna correct me here in a second, I'm sure. And so she said that a community needs a creative thread, or every community needs a thread. And I was like, well, creative output's a good idea. Like, can we make that a thread for something? And so from there, it just sort of spun into, let's bring this artist I have on tour to Chicago. Let's get a gallery. And let's make this about something that we both believe in. The creative output in the Muslim space is a good idea. And we've got this, Muslim artist that can perform. And let's, Sadaf, invite your friends, I'll invite mine. And let's make this thing happen. And we did. And more than twice the amount of people we thought would come came. And the rest is history. But I'll let Sadaf tell her version.
I think one of the starting pieces is just like the different background communities that both Rummi and I come from. So in my upbringing, like I was in a really big Muslim community. I went to Muslim private school for 12 years of my life. Like I'm a hijabi. So like my bubble of Muslimosity, right, is very unique and different from a lot of people who grow up Muslim in America. And Rummi's experience is like very different from mine, where his family is more like culturally Muslim, and they identify as Muslim, but it wasn't, like I studied like the fiqh sunnah, and I know like the Quran and tafsir and all of that stuff, whereas Rummi's a little far removed from that, and he didn't really know how to read and write it. So like we both had judgments for each other. Like I was like, oh, who's this guy who like
no shade
is in entertainment, and like has these artists, like who's that? And he had judgments about me, like, oh, this like super religious hijabi girl, like, do I even shake her hand, right? So we're coming from like both being like brown, both being like people who identify as Muslim, but just like very different upbringings, though we were both, born and raised in the Western world. So I think like that's a really important piece of like when it came to IllMuslims, because when we were trying to create this community, the idea was, how do you bring all these pockets of people who fall on like this spectrum of religiosity all in one room and it not be awkward? So how can my friends who might like want to go to the masjid on a weekend versus like his friends who might want to go to a club on a weekend all be in the same space and not feel awkward and like get to actually know each other and maybe not judge each other? Sure.
She's
Go
talking
for it.
about my friends want to go to clubs. Listen,
I'm
as well.
not judging. I'm just saying. It was
The idea was-
I'm painting a picture.
I just look. This is
Rummi's at Club Up now right now, so
yo. Okay, it's a fairly accurate picture. I think the idea, just as a quick interjection, the idea is that you have people that exist beyond the masjid, and that and regardless of whatever value there is in like masjid youth organizing and MSAs and things like that, there are folks that exist beyond that space, and that just because they're not able to come or want to be at the masjid or these other things all the time doesn't mean that they are abandoning their deen, or that they no longer believe in the principles of our faith. Folks have other stuff going on, and they're picking and choosing what they want to do with their free time. So
yeah,
we have that spectrum. But continue, Sadaf. Sorry to interject.
I think that's a really important point, because when it came to like defining our thread for our community, at first the lowest hanging fruit seemed easy to be Muslim, right? Like, oh, like our thread for our community is Muslim. But the problem in that is that you now have to define what Muslim is, and by defining it, we actually will now create people that will be outside of that and fringe, and that like defeats the purpose, because we want to create a space where anybody who self-identifies or feels comfortable to like be in a space with that like label can come there without us having to define what that means, right? And so for us, our thread actually, though IllMuslims is in the name, like we didn't define what being Muslim was, right? We defined our thread to be creative output, and that's really where we shifted our lens. Is like, there's all this beautiful, creative, talented output that's being produced in our communities, but like we're not supporting it, right? If you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, there's people in your community that you can go to that can support you in that mission, right? But if you want to be a fashion designer, like who do you go to within your community? Are there people? Do you go outside of your community, right? So how do we support that? And if you look at like the PR image that Muslims have, right? I think that's something that we really wanted to tackle. And if you look at this in history, the Renaissance, the art Renaissance is like what really helps shift perspective on a group of people. And that was really important to both myself and Rummi, especially me, like coming from education and often being like physically being a hijabi, like the face of Islam, in a place where like I'm the first interaction for a lot of students for someone who's Muslim, right? So being able to like paint our own narrative and like support the creatives that are out there was really, really the crux of what IllMuslims was. And yes, like by doing that, we created events and people came and consumed. But at the core, we were really hoping to support the artists, like the amount of brands that have launched their first pop-ups with us, or artists that have done performances for the first time with us, and we've supported them throughout this process. That's really the core of IllMuslims.
So you mentioned like this element of like who do you go to in the community? So this kind of like connection and mentorship within the community. So was that still a big part of the events that you were throwing and like the community that you were hoping to create?
Yeah, actually, pre IllMuslims, an event we hosted was called "I Don't Want to Be a Doctor," and I'll have Rummi speak to that. But yeah, it was about mentorship, and so this was kind of like emerging of us doing that and figuring out that we need to do this large scale.
Real quick, before I don't want to be a doctor, I just want to add in, she brought up Renaissance. It's the artists, the thinkers, the poets, right, the creators, creatives in any society that have moved that society forward, right? They have the audacity to dream of something that doesn't exist, and then some of them go out and create it. Or some of them build a blueprint, and generations later, somebody goes out and creates it. And so the idea is that if we celebrate, when we learn about ourselves and our identity and our faith, when we're celebrating that, like, we go to Safavids, Mughals, Ottomans, so on, and it's, well, what was celebrated about those societies and those moments in history? And it's sometimes the architecture, sometimes the miniature paintings and things like that. But it was the same thread of people that have existed throughout human history. The artists, the thinkers, right? The creatives that did that. So why are we not amplifying that now? And what if we were able to, in the the seat of the seat of the most advanced moment in human civilization, the most connected generation in the history of our species, and at a time where what are we doing right now? If we're able to do this now, we can share ideas. Like the Renaissance was a sharing of an idea, right, or multiple ideas, because of concentration and people being connected. So we thought, can we connect this thread of folks to build community, and how do we do that? So now, I don't want to be a doctor. I'm South Asian. My parents wanted me, I'm the eldest. There's two of us. They wanted me to be a doctor, and I didn't want to be. And it was as simple as, I don't want to be a doctor. And then I realized, how many other people my age, are there 1 million? Are there 2 million? How many people have said this phrase, I don't want to be a doctor? And who else can resonate and connect and embodies that sentiment? And it's not that we had any problem. I have tons of my friends are physicians. I have nothing against healthcare. I'm so glad that they did it. I'm glad that my father did it.
Your dad is.
Yeah, my dad is, and I'm so glad that he did as well. But it's not for everyone, and we need to make sure that whatever is your purpose, right, that we identify it, we unlock it, we unleash it, so that we can help develop an enlightened society if everyone's doing the thing that they're meant to do. And I don't think that it's just we're all physicians, because then who's doing the preventative stuff? The incentive would be everyone gets sick because the rest of us are physicians, right? So I don't want to be a doctor. For us was, we recognize the fact that our parents they know what they know, they see what they see, and that they're a little bit they're concerned. They just want us to be successful, stable, have a good life. And for them, they've got an example of how you do that. There's an infrastructure, there's a pipeline, there's pegs. So we did I don't want to be a doctor. The idea was that, well, okay, cool, let me show you that there are examples of other people that are successful. So we put together this panel of really dope, non-traditional discipline, figures from South Asian and beyond communities that were, worked at Rockefeller, worked for Rolling Stone, were head of an entire division at Saint Laurent Paris, launched their own media apparatus, and were formidable within the complex media network. So it was a great example, and each of them had a different journey. Some of them, their family was super supportive, and the industry was tough. Some of them, the industry was super supportive, and the family was tough. Some of them, so everybody had like a different journey to it. So that was like, the framework from which we were coming when leading into this. What is community? And do we have one of those?
I was going to just speak to like the mentorship. It's not,
right.
When we were developing IllMuslims, it wasn't just to like mentor the creative, but really to connect them to one another, right? So like you can have a full campaign where your photographer, your marketer, like you can utilize your models are all coming from the same pool of creatives that identify as Muslim, right? Just so happen to be Muslim.
Yeah. And it was that the big differentiation between, or the evolution, I would say, from the I don't want to be a doctor to now looking at it from the IllMuslim perspective? Or like, why did you feel the need to brand and create a completely different thing rather than just continue with the I don't want to be a doctor series?
I mean, for one, we started with the idea that if we have a community and the thread is creative output is a good idea, then what is a bold expression of that? So we define ill as the unapologetic expression of self. And ILL itself is an acronym for Inspired Lifestyle League, which, we can explain why that name is what it is later. But the reason it was a separate brand and had its own structure is that it wasn't the same project. The mission of I Don't Want to Be a Doctor was to give an example for both, for parents and young people to see that they can do it. The idea was efficacy. If you've seen something done, you believe that it's possible for you. For like Sadaf said, for IllMuslims, it was we wanted to build a community that was a parallel. So regardless of where you are on the spectrum of dogma and religiosity, regardless of where you are in your ethnicity and or your tastes and or your social interests, we wanted folks to be able to check the doctrine at the door and come in and understand that these are other people that in some capacity are on the spectrum of Muslim X and believe that creative output is a good idea. And so you already know there's that shared interest. And so explore one another because you are the art in this gallery, literally.
And I think like the format of both the events are different. So I Don't Want to Be Doctor is more of a panel, right? You have these people who are in industry sitting on stage speaking to their journey, their struggles, and their success, right? Whereas IllMuslims is a showcase of the talent. So like if you're a chef, it's a supper club. If you're a comedian, it's a comedy show. If you're a fashion designer, it's a fashion show. It's curated based on the talent and the art that's being showcased.
So yeah, like was that hard to like have people leave that dogma at the door? Like because I think when you're bringing together so much diversity in the same room, and whether that's like, like you mentioned, across like race and ethnicity, or even across just different interpretations and practices within Islam, like how did that work? Or like were there challenges that like came up that you were like, oh crap, we did not think of that?
So like we care very much about production value and experience design. And so we wanted to make sure that within the scope of our space, there was a degree of comfort for everyone there. So we look for the lowest common denominator. Now, there are some that engage in things that are, deemed unacceptable or haram within our faith practice. And there are others that will not touch that or do that. The idea was we want a space where you're not forced to experience something that's a violation of your version of practice. Right, so the things in the room, we had snacks and non-alcoholic mixology. We had DJs and we had music and sometimes musical performances, but the speakers weren't laced all throughout the room. There is an area that's more quiet where we've got like an audio-visual presentation going on, where you can play giant Jenga, and so you can have the space in the room that was more conducive to your area or your degree of comfort within a social setting. So we were mindful about, do we have enough of these, environments? Obviously, it's hard if you're, depending on space, to create fully separated spaces, which wasn't the intention. The intention was to bring all these people together, but give them at least a little bit of a social comfort blanket in the process.
I also think, like, to answer your question, yes, it's a challenge, right? Because there are people who think music is haram, and like our space has music, right? So by that, they may not feel comfortable. So I think there is a challenge that does happen. One of those challenges that are overcome is I think people, when we first started and as we got going too, were able to see what it was, and there was a way for them to kind of understand, like, oh, this might speak to me, let me check it out, right? I think people's curiosity and just like learning about it and that self-selection aids in that. But I mean, it is a challenge, and I don't think like we've really 100% figured it out. We're still like, going through the process and trying to curate what makes the most sense to get everyone to feel that it's a safe space for them. It's a process, but it's always on our mind.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's something that obviously with the Mosquers we've had to deal with since like day one as well, right? Just in terms of the differentiation between being a platform that doesn't try to judge based on someone's level of religiosity versus people judging you based on what you're presenting, right? And so it's a delicate balancing act, and it's something that I think you guys probably face more backlash for more than any other organization that's looking to put together creative events for the Muslim community. And I think part of that is also, you were one of the first to actually integrate really kind of, you used Ali and you used a lot of other creatives within the space to create like high quality production value videos to promote what you were doing, and almost showcasing this like I'd say like party atmosphere, or Asif wants to call it social atmosphere. Like, was that an intentional thing by you guys in terms of how you wanted to market IllMuslims and making it staunchly differentiated from like your halakha gatherings that you might expect of the Muslim community?
For one of the series, yeah, like we have
Like,
one series that IllMuslims throws. It's called the
yeah,
Be Social.
be social, yeah,
It is a social event, and that's what's being portrayed, a social event, right?
right.
So absolutely. I mean, you hit it on the head where like we were one of the first people to do those type of events in 2014. I remember like we got an email from someone when we our very first event saying like, hey, who's going to speak at this event? Because in their mind, Muslim events are only like
he was at the door.
lectures.
He was at the
Right?
door. My guy asked, yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, yes, we have
Brother,
people
who's
at the door.
speaking tonight? Like DJ Double Up? Maybe.
Hear from Jay-Z, Kanye.
Possibly.
Rihanna might show up.
I might make an announcement. Not sure fully. But hopefully, everybody is speaking tonight because that's what we want y'all to do with each other.
I mean, we
No, but it
knew
was cool
what
that they
we were
asked.
getting into, right? We knew that we were
Right.
first to do it. And, you know, I think like as we've grown and as we've done it, more and more people have seen that you can have spaces that don't have to have a specific agenda, where the agenda is you, the people, getting to know each other and to like build a community. That is the agenda, not, you know, it doesn't have to be like a fundraising event or a political event. It can just be an event, right? With creatives in the room and the support of the creativity.
And to add in I mean, just like on like, I'm a cheerleader for the people I've met along the way, and I've had the fortune of traveling a lot and living in a lot of places, and just being lucky enough to know folks that before any of us were doing anything of note, we were just kids with ideas and dreams and believed, hey, creative output is a good idea, right? And if had some of these people had themselves when we were younger, if there was an example, like we would be super excited about it and you know, showing up, pulling up to their exhibitions and galleries and showings. So when I saw that the people we'd met along the way, like, you know, Ali Malik, who I'd known since like 15, ironically met him in Orlando at this convention, and then also like, you know, Atif Atiq and like all these really dope creatives that we have in our space. The natural thing for us was this is the epitome of the community that we're trying to create. Like, we need this to happen. We need these people to be celebrated and have them connect with one another and so on. So for the production value for Be Social to look like a party, the idea was that it was a social. And what do we do when we celebrate as a people, as a community, when we're celebrating a wedding? If it's acceptable there, essentially the same thing was happening here. It wasn't that there was two people specifically that we were there to celebrate, but the idea was that like our community itself was having almost a marriage with the concept of committing to supporting this thread that we haven't necessarily felt support in. So we felt that it was totally fine to have to give equity to folks. So it's not, you don't have to be part of this social circle, or it's this party at somebody's house or a gathering at someone's place and you're not invited. No matter how open somebody makes something, it's like, yo, it's open and you bring whoever you like. You know, there's people that don't feel like they're welcome or comfortable there. So for us, it was like, you have equity. There's a value exchange. You bought a ticket. No one can tell you can't be here, and you can't. We hoped to eliminate the idea that you feel that this isn't yours. This is Sadaf and I are facilitators, and our host teams, like, this is theirs. They've invited all of their people. So we were just really excited to be in all these rooms because it's like, oh, this is y'all's, and thank you for letting us facilitate.
And I guess like this might be very much in the same vein, but it's just like as you were speaking, it kind of reminded me of how with the Mosquers, of course, being like a film festival and having, as Skander mentioned, like, we want people who identify as Muslims to be able to create film and then show it. And like, that's the criteria, right? Like if it meets all other technical criteria and you're a Muslim person and you're making this movie, then like, yes, get in here. Or it's about, if you're a non-Muslim person, then it's about your Muslim experience. And we've had like a couple of situations over the years where there's been like movies with content that we know we're going to get some comments about. It's like, it's very much like from a small but very vocal minority who, kind of feel that, that this isn't Muslim, this is portraying something that is not Islamic, that is haram, et cetera, et cetera. And I feel like at a certain point, like, so when you guys are creating events, for example, like there is, as you know, a subset of the population who, like, especially being born and raised here in the Western world, is very much like they're going to go to these types of events that are thrown by non-Muslim creatives, or sorry, non-Muslim like organizations, and are gonna, that's where they're gonna maybe find connection, and that's where they're gonna find community. And so it's like really wonderful to create that within the Muslim community, but like, how do you reconcile, or like what is your, I guess, attitude towards the people who are going to have a problem with it? Because I know, like, for us, like, we usually will have like a board meeting and we're like, okay, this is a movie that we're gonna screen, we know that we're probably gonna get, some comments about this. And so like, how do, as a board, are we cool with addressing those comments when they come up? Like, do we feel comfortable that, like, at the end of the day, this movie meets our mission and vision and what we're here to do, and so we're comfortable putting that up on the screen regardless of the kind of any pushback we get? So like, how do you reconcile those two things, I guess?
So by design, we're trying to create an environment that has something for the identifiable spectrums that we expect to be in the room. If your issue is, and there was somebody that came up to me, I hope I don't burn Sadaf's example. Someone came up to me and was like, "Yo, this is, astaghfirullah, bro. This is like reminding me of my old ways. I'm gonna have to go and this and that." I was like, "What old ways are you talking about?" And he starts saying like, "Oh, there's all these." All these beautiful women and blah, blah, blah. And I don't know, bro, and this and that. And I was like, first, like, I don't know you. Second, stop looking. Are you kidding me? And he's like,
Sounds
yeah,
like a you
whatever.
problem.
These girls are stush anyway, or they're snobby or whatever. And I was like, who are you talking about? And he points, and it's my sister-in-law. And I'm like,
Oh
get
my
out.
God.
Just get out. Stop trying to hit on married women or act like your deed has something to do with your insecurity. And so we have like a zero tolerance for like the using the excuse of faith to mask whatever other thing you might have going on. The other part of it is you will always find in a room where somebody is left to explore, experience, or understand it for themselves, and they're not making any connections, that there's a limited amount that they may gain. But if you have somebody approach them, introduce themselves, talk to them, share their story, take them to another person, bring them to a booth, and you're getting to hear about all these journeys, you might learn something that was like extremely unique, and it helps dispel some of the judgments that all of us walk into judgments somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. And so we made it a point that all of our hosts, their job in the room when the event starts is to look for someone that looks like they are not having as social of a time, or maybe having a harder time, or more timid, uncertain, and go and make them feel welcome and learn about them and share who you are, and then introduce them to another host. And so that's what it was. Our hosts were in the room actively seeking out people, connecting them, handing them off to another host. And all of the hosts knew everyone in the room because everybody at an event had to have been invited by hosts at some point. Right? Or either promoted to, or whatever it was. So we felt like that was the most appropriate way to design experience, while also not making the mistake of attempting to control the expression of a community. And I think for the most part it addressed it. Obviously there's some moments, but I'll defer to Sadaf because I feel like she probably has a good example.
I think like because we're both Mosquers and IllMuslims are in a similar arena of like taking other artists' work and showcasing it, right? So you have this mission of supporting creative output, but you have to balance the toe of policing and censorship, right? And I think that's like your questions where it's coming from. And that's a challenge, right? Because like part of your mission is to support that creative output by someone who either identifies themselves as Muslim, and so we want to support them for that reason, right? Or it's a new perspective that they're putting out there. And then that question of censorship and policing. I think it's, you just have to go back to your mission and what it is you're looking for. And I think myself, like having a background in education, I've been in the industry for over a decade now. There's a saying that we say that is, there is no one set curriculum for every single classroom of students, right? You cannot have that, because if you have that, that is not a curriculum that is actually pushing them forward. And I think that's like eventually the conversations that happens with IllMuslims is like the community and the space that's being built. We want it to be welcoming for everybody, but we recognize that there's going to be some people where their boundaries just don't like align with that. And that's okay, because there's a group of people that are not being serviced by other things that need this space. And so we're going to service that. And those people who find problems with IllMuslims, that's unfortunate. We'll try to adjust so that they can feel comfortable. But the good thing is those people do have an alternative. So they're not left to have nowhere, whereas the people we are servicing actually don't, right? Like if IllMuslims just dissolves, where do they go? Where does Muslim X go, right? So I think that's kind of like what we have to tone. The anecdote story that I want to say is one really important thing that I think something that like makes me really motivated to continue on Muslims is actually not the Muslim narrative, it's the non-Muslim narrative. Because something that happened with our events was that, yes, we're supporting Muslim output, but it was a space where so many non-Muslims came because it didn't seem so intimidating for the ones at least I spoke to. They didn't feel as intimidated to come to our events as they might have to other Muslim events, right? Like a fundraiser or a charity event or maybe the masjid. It can seem a little bit more intimidating from the experiences I've heard, right? And one of my favorite experiences was at a Be Social in IllMuslims at New York. And this non-Muslim came to me. He knew that I was one of the founders, and he said, "My mind is blown right now." And I was like, "Well, welcome, like what's going on?" He's like, "I rep Profound Aesthetic, the brand." Yeah, Profound Aesthetic, the brand.
Sorry, Nabil, sorry Faraz.
Sorry. I had a great talk. I was like, what? Profound Aesthetic is a streetwear brand. And he's like, "I rock that brand so hard. Like, I follow everything they do." I had no idea that the founders were Muslim, and I just met them. Like that is like, my mind is blown. I'm texting all my like streetwear friends, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like, that's cool. Like, that's like the experience that I want people to have. It's that like this thing that you're like regularly love and that you in your closet wear on your body. Like, yeah, like you had no idea that that person that behind that creative was a Muslim. Like it helps shift that perspective. And that's like that non-Muslim narrative, or like the non-Muslim experience that is so beautiful that's happening, right? And I think when you're thinking about like censorship and policing, you're closing that door. You're closing that opportunity for that renaissance for the Muslim narrative to be out there and for non-Muslims to experience it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those things that we talk about all the time as well, right? It's about building bridges, not just, amongst the Muslim community, but between the Muslim and broader community, which is, for us anyway, what was the entire intention of the Mosquers? Whereas I think it's almost the inverse with IllMuslims, whereas for you guys it's about connecting within the community, but then your kind of additional goal has become extending to beyond the community. And on that point, and again, I promise this is the last controversial things that we'll talk about, but on that idea of like representing different components of the Muslim community, I mean, this is something that you guys got into a little bit of, I don't want to say hot water. I think it was just one of those things that was an easy target for people to pick on back in 2018 when you guys had your a promotional video and you guys were I guess the idea of representation not being fully reflective of the American Muslim landscape was brought to the attention, right? And what do you guys did you guys take that and try to actively combat that in any way moving forward, or was it something that you thought was just you know what, they didn't quite get it, right? Like this wasn't the intention of this video. You know, obviously we recognize the fact that the Black Muslim community is substantial, and in fact the largest component of the American Muslim population. And this was just an unfortunate situation. Like, what was your entire read on that scenario?
So I'll jump in. So there was a lot of misinformation, and also I think, you know, when someone says something on Twitter, other people might feel aligned with that statement, and so they'll retweet the statement. But we found a lot of folks hadn't really looked at the video, like watched it. And so the premise that it was a promotional video was like, no, we didn't shoot that. That was Now This. We were interviewed for Now This because they wanted to explore how is this group using online interactions via social media to convene people in real life. So that was the interview that we did for Now This. And and they asked for B-roll and like captured, you know, some of the things that they showed in the video, right? So different events that we've had, so forth. And so when we're answering the question, I think within the video, Sadaf was speaking to, you know, if you come from a South Asian or Arab background, because the precursor to that, the context was Sadaf is South Asian and grew up in an Arab community. And so she was only speaking to what she knows, right? So if you grow up in a South Asian Arab background, your parents might say, okay, cool, you can do this thing as a hobby, not as a job. And amongst our Black Muslim friends, some of that is their experience with their parents, and also for a lot of them, it's not. Like they have a different lens or view. And I think it's largely because a lot of us as you know, immigrant populations or immigrant diaspora, we came here, and so there's a certain element of a colonial or an attemptive decolonizer mindset going on, whereas the African American community that's here has a much different experience. And so for us to attempt to speak for that experience, I think is a disservice. We should be giving stages and microphones and platforms for them to share their experiences and us to learn from it, right? So when the interview was going on and the commentary, like for a lot of it, I was like, yeah, man, I'm with you. I feel that way, but like not us. It's not us, but it is a problem in our community, and it's one that we're seeking to address. And so wherever we do an event, it is a deliberate part of the event. We have a call specifically with the host saying we want this to be as diverse as possible, and you need to think about the spectrum of the people that you know, and try to make sure that people that you may not think of, folks that you may not always be around, are also included and invited. The reality is we had some incredibly diverse events, and some were less so. And that usually ended up being because either a host that had been part of it before couldn't be a part of it, or it was just the normal cycle. Every 4 events in a city, a certain group, you know, are unavailable because life. So I think it was misconstrued in the way that it was presented. But for us, it was like, look, we've always been intentional about this part, and that there is absolutely always room to do better. And so we were like, great, this is an opportunity for us to do better faster, because there is such a strong emotional sentiment around and rightfully so, because there's generations of deep-rooted pain, and from first the oppressors and then fellow Muslims, right? So I have you know, no qualms with how the African American Muslim community is feeling towards us or anyone else, because it's like, yeah, man, this has been bad for too long, and so I'm not going to try to tell you don't take it out on me, or sure, you might be more angry in this moment with us because of all the other pain, but like, we're here to listen. We're here to do better, because we are still a reflection of the broader community, and so we want to bring you guys in. I don't know if did that answer it?
I think
No, I think. Go
You
ahead,
did a
Sadaf.
pretty good job. I mean, it's just layered, right? Like, to Rummy's point, like, yes, there was a lot of misconstrued words taken out of context, and I think that there's a lot of people who didn't watch the video or have never even been to our events, making comments, right? But equally on the other side, we have always been intentional and know and recognize that we can do better and we want to do better, right? We want our room. That was like the premise of IllMuslims, is to have a space where it is a true diverse reflection of anyone who identifies as Muslim, and like that spans every race, that spans everything that like you really can define as Muslim American, right? So being able to like intentionally do a better job of that is really important to us. And the way that Muslims is structured, I think a lot of people didn't realize this, or still to this day might not realize this, because to us, like, our production value is so important. We really tried our best to make it look as put together as it could be. But Rummi and I were just doing this as a hobby, as a side project. Like, the whole time I had a full-time job and Rummi had a full-time job, and it was just something both him and I were doing on the weekends, right? And I think it might have seemed like this big institution that has all these resources that can do X, Y, and Z. We were really just relying on anyone who would volunteer. Like, there is no like application to be a host on our website. Every single event had want to be a host, submit a form here. And it's not an application. Like, you submit it, you automatically become a host. That's all it takes.
Well, I think the document itself actually is called an application. So
oh.
And I do remember I had to convince Rummi that Edmonton was worth coming to. I do remember there was an application process.
I think it's just so that we don't end up in, we like, oh, there's the next video come out. Like, you heard what this girl said? Here's the receipt. Look at their website. No, so it wasn't, to her point, it wasn't that, you're sharing basic info with us so that we have a lens and understanding. It's not the purpose of it was not to filter.
Right.
It was just to get a better understanding of, the large volume of people that we want to speak to.
You guys had such a meteoric rise between, like, I want to say like 2015 to like 2018, right? And like you said, Sadaf, you guys were doing it part-time. Looking back at that time period, was it difficult to manage expectations versus the reality of what was on the ground? Like, I can only imagine that balancing all of that was challenging, but do you feel that the expectations of trying to be, like you mentioned, this like giant corporation that's got all these resources, and then the reality of the fact that you guys are just two people trying to make community happen on the weekends, how was balancing all that?
So here's the thing, right? So Sadaf and I are facilitators. Yeah. So we would set up the structure, the model, what we want to do, and then empower the local groups to contribute what makes this different or what makes this unique to them. And we would, create the framework and execute the framework, but we gave creative control largely to our host groups. So it was actually, because we can't take all the credit for making each of these events a success. Mm-hmm. And the whole point was, remember in the beginning, it was equity, man. This is not about her and I. This is about us. Where's the community? The art belongs to community. The experience belongs to community. And the future belongs to the community. So let's be one. Let's become one and do that. So, there's folks, we get comments from time to time. Oh, you really need to revisit your policies and practices and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but it's like the event is a reflection of that mix of people. Right. And sometimes the same mix of people have a completely different cohort attend, and so on. So it's like, I didn't feel, the first time that you think you're getting canceled and you feel like you don't deserve it or something to that effect, it's hard to not take it personally. But for Sadaf and I, we thankfully were able to look at it from the space of like, these are real problems that we are attempting to address. And so, let's talk to all these people. And so we were in the comments being like, hey, fully aligned with that point. I think there's a lot that we can learn from one another, and maybe some things that we don't know about each other's experience. Would be happy to schedule a call at your convenience. And there was hundreds of messages. Like, that was my MO for response if somebody had critique. And it was like, unless it was a blatant lie. Like, there was a group in the UK that's like a large group, and I got a call from the BBC saying, hey, do you want to address blah, blah, blah? And I was like, address what? And they're like, like these guys, there's this group that's saying that, like, what are you doing in this blasphemous way, using Islam and then having, like, sex, drugs, and alcohol at your events? And I was like, well, none of those have ever happened at our events. So I don't know what is going on over there, but none of that has ever happened.
So were you just like, no comment, or were you like, here's some facts, buddy?
No, the facts were the same thing. I was like, none of that like has ever happened, nor will happen. Like that's not a. It's not
I feel like no comment would be a dangerous response in that situation. Yeah,
for sure.
What about like personally though? I mean, like
maybe a genius marketing play.
Yeah, touche. You have a whole different crowd.
Does it or doesn't it?
Well, what about personally though? I mean, like trying to balance all of that during this like meteoric rise. I mean, did at any point you guys decide that you wanted to do this potentially full time, or was it always something that was supposed to be kind of on the side as a project?
No, it was like there was a moment like a year in, and I was like, one of us got to be full time and do this. And so I pulled back from my other projects and started doing this full time. And I'm sure Sadaf was like, yo, that should have been me. Why would you want to go in first? So sorry. I was ambitious. But I don't think we thought that it was a meteoric rise in the middle of it. I don't think that we had we didn't know that didn't feel like we're on a rocket ship. It didn't feel, I was just consumed by the idea of how do we do this in a way that is more meaningful to the people we're trying to create value for. And more people got with it, and we're like, all right, how do we make it better? What else can we do? What's different? And then for us, the interesting part was like thinking about, should we be doing like fiscal projections for growth strategy? And, we started getting there and like, wait, if we wanted to do a festival, how would that happen? Right? Because it's not going to be we've done a bunch of really cool events at museums and galleries and places like that. And then all of a sudden we've got I Heart Halal.
Right.
Even though it kind of was like all of a sudden, but somebody else heard it. So, and we were partners in the process. So the idea was we were just tunnel vision and doing the thing we were doing for the people we were doing it for. And it just felt warmer every time because we met Sikandar. You know what I mean? We met We met Isaac from Mercy Mankind. We met, Marlo bro from Detroit. We met all sorts of Anik, Abir, all these artists, Mosquers, like all these really, really dope Muslim creatives. And for us, it was just like, yo, can you believe it? Like, this is sick. We've got all of this in our community.
I think
what it was. We didn't see the rocket ship.
When you love what you're doing, like you might be burnt out, but you don't realize it because you just love it. You're in the thick of it, right? So I think that was one thing. But even though like technically we're flying and doing these events, every week, whatever, to Rummi's point, like we would always tell the creatives, like, this is your canvas. So depending on the creative and what their output and what they're showcasing, it was different, right? So like some events would have, like a graffiti artist, and some events would have like a music performance. So they feel different, they look different, and I think that's what makes it exciting, and it changes it up for us too, because doing the same cookie cutter thing every weekend is going to be really boring and exhausting. But having good creatives take ownership of it, and then also like really having teams, the host teams that really were like the grunt work of everything. I think just that was really important. And then I think one thing too that not a lot of people realize, it was really important for us to have our events in venues that equally supported Muslim creative output. So we didn't do our events in a place that like was just a regular schmegular like banquet hall, like no shade to that, but it had to be a art gallery that like specifically had artists that they curate from minority groups that like saw our vision, believed in our vision, because we wanted that money that people are paying for this event to like go towards, it's going towards the venue and paying for the venue. We wanted to be in a place that actually supports what we're doing and the mission of it too. So I think that always helped too, because we built these relationships with our venues too, that we were hosting these events, these galleries, you know.
Yeah, and they would come to us and say that we are so enlightened by this audience, and this is really encouraging for us in terms of the type of content that we curate, because you've brought this group out here, and they were interacting with the art we have and so on, and we had no idea that this is a segment that we should try to tailor some of our curation toward. I think that part was cool. The other part was when we went to these venues, like we first saw alignment on our mission. So we think creative output's a good idea. Do y'all agree with that? They're like, obviously we're a art museum and an art gallery, right? And then we're like, we think creative output is a good idea for the American Muslim space, and we believe that it should be diverse and expansive. And are y'all down with that? And they were like, yeah, that's awesome. That's great. And so then, and there's venues that we didn't work with, right?
Yeah.
But it was rare for us to have anything less than an excited position. Like even, okay, so we're talking about Canada here for a second, Mosquers, Edmonton. I never imagined in my life I'd go to Edmonton for anything. And to be able to, no shade on Edmonton, we had a great time. But to be able to go out there and connect with what felt like a very familiar experience, but still at the same time completely different, right? And seeing that there are nuanced differences and needs of different groups, and that they're all aligned around that same thing. I think we just tapped into a moment that our generation is experiencing as a diaspora. And it's, we believe this is a good idea. So let's put the creatives out front, and everybody else put your money where your mouth is. If you're not a creative, go ahead and be a patron.
And so, like, a lot of the events that you're talking about, and I know, like, a lot of your Be Social stuff, that all took place in Chicago. And
Be Social is all over. Be Social is everywhere.
All over.
Be Social is everywhere. Yeah.
Okay, because that's what I wanted to ask. So, like, so we went to iHeart Halal in 2019, which was super fun. And then I know that, like, a lot of your, like, I guess I just want to ask. So, like, it's everywhere, which is awesome, because that was the question. But what about the different communities and stuff? Like, were there challenges when you had kind of went to different cities and you were like, oh, like, this is a barrier that the team here is experiencing that we need to support them through, or anything like that?
I don't know that there was like anything that we felt like, hey, y'all are uniquely experiencing this. Partly because everyone believed that they were uniquely experiencing all the challenges that they experienced. But in reality, the challenges were uniform. Right? So everyone just had this perception that like, yo, yeah, I mean, that's cool, but yo, like, in Houston, it's not really going to work, because our community is like this and this. And I was like, same in Chicago, same in New York, same in LA. Next, hit me with another objection. we went in with the, I don't know if it's motivation or just it's truth or reality or whatever, but it was the idea that, y'all, our experiences are not as unique as we think they are. There are 1 million people minimum that have lived this experience somewhere before. And so there is precedent for what we're going through. Not to say that you're not unique, but the challenges you're facing are not unique to just your community. So if you remove that as a mental obstacle, are you willing to do certain things? And the answer was yeah. Yeah, okay, so you're saying it's not just here, it's other places too? All right, cool, let's go, let's try it. And then they would see 300 people show up, and they were like, wow, this was here the whole time.
Nice. And so, like, where are you going now? Like, do you have any, like, plans for IllMuslims, like, for the upcoming future? And, like, where can we, are you coming to Edmonton?
Before you answer that, I just wanted to ask a different type of question around that too, because, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, but I feel like around 2019, the Be Socials kind of took a backseat to, like, Wallah, she's funny, and then iHeart Halal. Like, was that intentional, or did you kind of feel like, okay, you've established the community in these major cities of the creative communities, and now you want to do something new, or was there some totally different reasoning behind that? Or
for me, it was, and I'll let Sadaf answer the rest of it. For me, it was always, this is a creative community and it's a lifestyle, and we as Muslims are not only, or as American Muslims, or whether you do or don't identify, and culturally, whatever your spectrum is, it's not that you only have one experience, right? 4th of July, you might have a barbecue. What's our take on that, right? How do we get different ethnic groups and spectrum of religiosity out to an event that we're all going to partake in? So if there's stuff that we're all doing separately, our goal was, how can we make it to where we can do it together and everybody feel equity? So Be Social was the place that we were convening folks, and it was why we named it Be Social. We're literally inviting you to come be social, meet one another, and see that there is a shared experience and value. And then what are the other elements? How can we bring this group that has convened through other elements of their life cycle so that we can create that experience throughout? So that's where, breakfast at night, our suhoor concept came into play. The Good God Supper Club, which was our take on interfaith iftars. Wallah, She's Funny and Hilarious, right? We did 2 comedy tours, but we did them for charity. We did it with Penny Pill USA. And then we got with Mpac and their nonprofit, APICC, and co-produced I Heart Halal. So these were all different moments in the experience. And the idea was that we wanted to be able to have a holistic offering, because all we're doing is creating social experiences on the bedrock of creative community with the thread of creative output is a good idea.
Sadaf, anything to add to that? Or
The only thing I would add is that, yes, it was intentional. So and that was the plan all along. Right?
Oh, cool. Thanks for answering the question. Okay, let's move on. No. Yeah. Go on, Sadaf. Yeah.
She's an educator after all, right? It was, it was a plan all along. Like, Be Social was the lowest hanging fruit. That's the way that you can get people in a room together to start building your community. And because to start there, it's the most easy way for someone to come and try something new. And then from there, we can go on through the other pieces of like doing a fundraising for charity. Like we built, we supported these orphan kind villages through our Wallah, She's Funny tour. So doing all of that stuff was really important to us too, because we want to give back to the community.
Orphan kind was through the Hilarious.
My bad. The
women's empowerment was the
Wallah, She's Funny.
Wallah, She's Funny. Yeah. Right on. Is that kind of the goal now, to continue to partner with these sorts of purpose-based, like mission-based initiatives and utilize creative arts to kind of push that forward? Is that kind of the new direction for IllMuslims, or are you guys kind of just constantly brainstorming and we'll find out what's next when it happens?
So we are always down to collaborate with, if it's a purpose-based organization, we have to align on the idea of inclusivity, equity, and breaking bad cycles of experiences and sentiment that exists within our community. So if they're aligned on that front, then we're happy to do that. What we won't do is fix a problem for an organization that has been problematic. But we will align with those that have an openness to wanting to do it right. So maybe they haven't done it right, but So yes, we will continue to work with purpose-based organizations, as well as do things just completely by ourselves.
Nice. Okay, I know
about what's next, huh?
Yeah, what's next, man?
Yeah, bro, let him answer my question.
COVID. Look, whether you believe in the risk factors of the COVID-19 virus or you don't, we spent about a year and a half all kind of kept away from one another and in isolation. So for a group that launched itself on the premise of Be Social, that was tough for us. But I'm just really excited about the opportunity for us to take the mask off. And I'll just leave it cryptically.
Okay. I feel like that was a teaser. Okay,
There's
all right.
layers to that.
I feel like that was a teaser. That's some promo material right there.
They're very intuitive.
So you are a teacher, or you were a teacher. Are you still a teacher?
Not in the traditional sense. I am essentially what an education consultant would be. So I work with school districts and teachers building their teacher capacity, making them better teachers.
Cool. And how has like your work with like creatives and creative spaces impacted?
Teacher whisperer?
Yeah. How has it impacted that? And like, are people easily able to kind of incorporate that into the classroom? Because that would, I'm sure, improve any and all educational attempts.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a classroom teacher, one thing I found really problematic with our education system was in its current iteration, the way education works is we reward obedience, right? Students
Mhm.
who are A students are traditionally obedient students, right? But when you look at Forbes and you look at all the great entrepreneurs and people who really changed, they push the boundaries, they ask questions, they, they're thinking on a different perspective or level. And the current iteration of schooling doesn't support that. And so for me, as someone who like really values creative output and entrepreneurship, like that was always a challenge, right? So working towards that red line tape and being in the position I am now, like I am able to support that. And there is this shift in pendulum swing of what we look at good education in our country, in our world, and that's really fun to be on the cusp of that and like to be pushing that um, within the schools I work with currently.
Mhm. That's very cool. I feel like those kids are lucky to have that.
I mean, the cool thing is, it's like I think people are starting to recognize that, right? You have people like Chance the Rapper and LeBron James who are like now dabbling in education because they're recognizing like creativity is just something so valuable and important in a well-cultured, educated citizen, and it's just
Mhm.
something that hasn't traditionally not been funded or looked upon. Even just the way that the schooling system exists, it was created to build factory line workers, right? Like the bell is a result of factory line workers and creating that like from this time to this time. So
Mhm.
changing up is really, really important, and being able to like have that kind of like duality between all Muslims and my education world is it's fun and it's exciting to see how it can travel.
I was saying my brother and my uncle always tell me to not let school get in the way of my education. So I feel like Sadaf has really enlightened my
Good
pursuit of
advice.
education.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Profound, profound.
Aesthetic.
So Rami, you recently joined Mpac in a full-time role, right? I believe it's full-time, I
Yeah.
assume. Yeah. So what motivated you to do that? I know you were involved in politics and campaign management for a number of years. What drew you towards Mpac in that capacity?
So I joined Mpac. Actually, my friend Tayyab brought me in to Mpac a year ago as the national policy advisor to support on some campaigns, concepts, and policy work. And I had a really positive experience with them over the course of that year. And alhamdulillah, in February, I became the chief operating officer. And and for me, the thing that really stands out about Mpac is it is a values-based organization. And when you work in politics and you've got a lot going on in the last 24 years, there's been tons going on politically, the spectrum and ideological shifts. But at minimum, since Obama through insurrection, which is a weird way to frame an era, but just a ton has happened,
Just call it the
and so
Trump era too, but
yeah,
that
the
works.
Trump. So you've got a lot of polarization happening on ideological spectrums, and so in that shift, people in politics have tended to kind of shift away from the core value of the thing that they're advocating for, right? So often you have folks that are conservative that are not really actually conserving much. They're just destroying other things. And folks that are progressive aren't really bringing society to a progressed point because the idea is that we care more for all peoples and it becomes more of a scorched earth. I'm not saying that that's the only thing that happens on the other side, but you see these emerging examples on either end. MPAC is Islamic values are American values.
What was that? Hang on, we got to pause for a second.
So
What was that?
Sorry, that was my
Oh
sister.
my God, we're keeping that in the edit. But
Oh
all right,
God, I'm so sorry. Please continue
that should be an
talking.
ad lib on someone's record.
that was incredible. All right, sorry, go
Uh,
ahead.
so it's like so at MPAC, it's Islamic values. We have shared Islamic and American values, right? Mercy, justice, equality for all, freedom from fear, so on. So you've got this premise of we don't have a crisis of identity at the Muslim Public Affairs Council in being American and being Muslim, and those things don't they don't malign. They're not, they're not a contradictory experience. So I really enjoyed that about Mpac, and I think that it's demonstrated over the course. It started in 1988 with Dr. Maher Atoud and Salam Al-Murayadi. And so Salam's the president, and he's empowered me as the COO. I'm just really excited to move that forward, and I think that we're the. I just keep looking at it.
Yeah. So I love how hard we're trying to keep this.
Sneeze. I'm like trying to keep. I forgot what I was saying.
It's so impressive, man. Like you're trying to keep this straight face the entire time, and Sophia's just dying in the background. It's kind of incredible.
Yeah, I'll leave it with this. We have a program happening right now called the Congressional Leadership Development Program. And we have 20 American Muslims in Hill internships from all over the country, all sorts of backgrounds. We cover the housing and we pay them a stipend. And this is a cohort of people that are getting the experience of their own Hill internship, but also their cohort's Hill experience all at once. And so that's how you move community forward.
Very cool. And we've had the chance to speak with Sue Obeidi before as well on this podcast, who's doing a lot with Impact's Hollywood Bureau to help advance the storytelling and creative community within Hollywood and film and media. So you guys are doing some cool work there too.
Over in our Hollywood Bureau.
Right on.
I'm still in the policy lens, so
no.
Shout out to Sue. I
100%.
wasn't ignoring our Hollywood Bureau work.
No, she's great.
Awesome. And then just one kind of last question for both of you. What is, I think we just like to hear, what is a creative endeavor that you as an individual are really proud of?
And it doesn't have to be IllMuslims if you don't want it to be.
Yeah, whatever.
It could be Burger Bish too, if you want to set up.
That's a throwback.
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 Wait, explain, please.
It's not dead. It's just run by someone that's not Sadaf.
Wait, what?
It used to be.
You got hacked? You got hacked?
No. I used to really be into burgers, but for some reason, I just don't crave red meat as much as I used to. So I don't find myself eating. I used to eat burgers every other day. So I had the Burger Bish. But as I've been weaning off of red meat, we both have a friend that does halal food blogging, and so on his Instagram, I added my account.
He doesn't want to say anyone's name. Shout out Halal.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
But he shouldn't get a shout out because he hasn't done anything with it. All he does is just his own picture.
Himad's getting hate.
So,
by the way, we have 12 questions from Himad for you, Rummi, but we didn't get into any of them. But it's okay. It's okay.
Wait, you polled questions?
Oh yeah, Asif's got 10 questions. No, we didn't get to them. But he's got 10. We've got talk to us about the time you were a bouncer. Talk to us about the time you found out you were lactose intolerant. We've got a lot of questions from Hamad.
Wow, you guys are that that interview people that find the deep.
Oh yeah,
crazy research.
Deep dive.
Yeah.
If you guys have another 2 hours, we can get into that.
I was a bouncer first
maybe
of
we'll
all.
say.
And I was with him when I was
There you go. Okay, sorry, Sadaf, we interrupted you. Go.
No, I mean
your most creative endeavor.
I have Rummi go first. I have to think.
Oh man, okay. The creative endeavor I'm most proud of. I mean, honestly, I think it's IllMuslims. It's the thing I'm most proud of. Each thing I think that I've had a chance to build, I've been most proud of at that time, and I feel like IllMuslims is sort of a combined evolution of a lot of it. Sikandar knows this, but I used to work in music, and after leaving the mainstream stuff that I was doing, I was really committed to wanting to see South Asian talent, accelerate and do all. And so, it is near and dear to my heart. But the launch of the mixtape project that I did with an artist known as Mickey Singh, that to me was a really personal, creative moment. It was Mickey's grit and talent and my tenacity, and we didn't have a budget. We half of that was in my bedroom, and we just pulled scraps together. And Sadaf is actually who uploaded the tracks to like iTunes originally when we were trying to get the mixtape out. And so it was just really, really grassroots. And we did it in a way where I don't think anyone knew that we were just that much like solo on what we were doing. So that was, that's started there. And same goes with like all the other artists I work with. But then like, I Don't Want to Be a Doctor was a major moment because I'd never done like a large scale panel with folks that have actually done all of this really cool stuff in their careers. And like, they answered the email, you know what I mean? Like they replied, we're like, yeah, this is dope. We'll pull up. And so that was cool. But IllMuslims is a whole different thing. So like the feeling of pride that I think I have, and I'm sure Sadaf does, is like, we have a community that like our first event in LA, people came out, we sold out. We looked at each other like, who do we think we are? Like, we don't know that many people in LA. We sold out a week and a half before we went there, and we go there, and everyone's meeting each other largely for the first time. That Ramadan, there was like 8 iftars in that squad. And to me, that was like, whoa, it happened. Mm-hmm. They are mingling, convening. They have a community. People that live on the same block. They're being social. They lived on the same block and some of them didn't know that they lived on the same block. And they met at this thing, and now it's a community. And these folks still hang out. They see each other, and they convene. A lot of them have come here to Orlando this weekend. So, Illy for me.
Right on. Yeah. Sadaf?
For me, definitely IllMuslims. Equally because I think seeing the amount of Muslim or brands by Muslims or people who are Muslims or even Muslim brands, how much they've grown, how widespread and household names that they've become, and us to be part of that journey and support them.
Mercy.
Like to just watch a Netflix show and see some of the people we've worked with.
Yeah.
That just feels really, really great. That what we set out to do to support creative output, like we've been able to then be a family with those creatives, right? It's just something really near and dear to my heart. Second is definitely Wallah, She's Funny. It obviously falls under the IllMuslims brand, but I think just people didn't think that people would show up for an all-female lineup of comedians and they wouldn't think it's funny or it wouldn't sell out. Most of our events sold out. We raised so much. I think it was, Rummi, what was the total amount of money?
Almost $800,000.
Wow.
Just from that tour. Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
So the amount of money that, we're able to raise just from that. And honestly, just generally how funny those women are. We went to every single one of those shows and, they're repeating their jokes, but I still laughed every single time. They were that good, and then just to be part of that was really, really beautiful and empowering to see that.
Amazing.
You know what was great? The first tour, Hilarious, we had Athir and Yasmin were on Hilarious, and both of them are very funny. And so I'm side stage, I was introducing in between comics or whatever. And I remember realizing, like, somebody came off, I don't remember who was standing next to me. A comment was made like, yo, she's funny. I didn't think she'd be funny. And I was like, that's a weird thing to tell me when you're here side stage. And, and I remember responding, I'm like, dude, Wallah, she's funny. And then I was like, wait a minute, hold up. That's a real thing. Our community has this hesitation about just because someone is a woman, like almost like you have to prove it. You have to swear by Allah that that's the case, And so that was where, and I was like, Sadaf, what do you think about? And she's like, can you focus on the thing in front of you?
That's
yeah,
awesome.
no, that was such a good title, though. I remember when we got some of the promo here, even though you didn't come here. But please, next time, include us on your tour schedule. I promise. We'll find some people for you. Like, it'll happen.
All I can promise is that our names and titles will probably become more and more dad jokey as we go.
I mean,
I'm
Fully
an
on
elder
board.
millennial now, so
Again.
I've lost the.
And I'm a lane
factor.
teacher.
No, I will say you guys have an amazing ability to name events. I mean, again, popcorn was all you guys. I will 100% tell anybody that popcorn was the most genius title for the event that we throw. So we
And it
will
made the
always be in
marketing
debt.
so
Oh.
easy.
Oh yeah, so good. Except the
Throw some
confusion.
popcorn on
The
it.
confusion is always still there. Like people will be like, "Oh, why is an extra bag of popcorn so expensive?"
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
God.
true. That's
Constant,
so we have
constant.
to be like popcorn after party.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a
That's awesome.
$20 bag of popcorn.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so to wrap things up, we like to end with some rapid fire questions. Rummi, I know you're tight on time. Do you have another 5 minutes for us?
You got it. I got 5 for you.
Okay, right on. Okay, there's no right or wrong answers to this. It's literally the first thing that pops into your guys' heads. You just blurt it out. Sophia, I'm gonna let you start because I see question 5 is all yours. So
Yes. Okay. So your most rewatched movie.
Mean Girls.
Nice.
4 Lions.
Ooh, oh, good answer. Okay, interesting.
They're both good answers. Excuse me.
No, Mean Girls is great too, bro. I mean, I just haven't heard 4 Lions before in this. But what's the most expensive thing you've either broken or lost?
Passport.
Ooh, that would suck.
It costs you a lot more than just money. You know?
Were you stranded somewhere, or were you like in America at least?
I was at home. I was in Chicago.
Oh man.
I was leaving for the airport, and Chicago is windy, and I got knocked over by the wind. It was ridiculous gust. And then in the process, I don't know where my passport was, but I was on my way to the airport, and I didn't realize I'd lost my passport until I got to the airport.
Damn.
And so I didn't get to go to my aunt's nikah because yeah. So that was the most.
Is she
costly
still
loss
mad
ever.
about it?
I don't think so. I made it to the wedding itself, but like the nikah didn't.
Dang. Okay.
For me, it would be losing my cell phone my first year teaching. One of my students who actually was out, he was in juvie, but he was able to come to school with the ankle bracelet, actually stole my phone and did it the last day before Thanksgiving break. So I was all break without a cell phone because I felt like I could get it back from him on return. So I didn't want to invest in a new one. And I was a poor teacher, right? I'm not going to try to buy a new cell phone. So I spent that entire break doing the old school tech, sending emails to people I will be there at 5:30 p.m. Happy to download a paper with the Google Maps.
Oh, best.
Oh my
MapQuest
goodness.
is
Yeah,
the best.
MapQuest.
It was really humbling and a nice experience to not have a cell phone and do the stuff the old school way.
Did you get the phone back?
No.
Oh, all of that for
I
nothing.
mean, he admitted it. He just ended up selling it during the holiday and he couldn't get it back.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Dang. Okay, next is a book you'd take with you on a deserted island.
I'd choose
Rubaiyat.
Proud by Mpac Muhammad. It's one of my favorite books.
Okay. Rummi, what did you say?
Rubaiyat, the works of Umar Khayyam.
Okay, right on. Question 4. Would you trade 25% of your intelligence for an additional 25% of hotness?
No.
Sadaf is right?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Sadaf's I got a lot of intelligence. I like it.
Said she would? She's got intelligence to spare?
She just said that.
Does that make it sound like I don't have intelligence to spare?
It does. It does indeed.
Or you would think you're hot.
No,
Yeah,
I just
you think you're too hot
makes
already.
You sound conceited. You're like, oh, yeah.
Right on. Good stuff.
Okay, and last
So
question.
many layers.
So many. That could be an entire podcast just on that question and people's answers to it.
Gender issues.
Oh my god, so many. Okay, the last question is your favorite way to eat potatoes. So mashed, fries, chips,
Waffle fries.
scalloped. Yeah.
Oh,
nice.
waffle. Nice. Okay.
I love waffle fries, but I think my favorite way to eat potatoes is a crinkled fry.
Crinkle cut fries are, yeah.
Are you guys
Any-
serious about the poutine?
Oh, I mean, poutine
Weirdly,
is
no.
always.
Poutine is soggy fries. It's like a weird.
No, they can. You got to eat it fresh, and then they're not soggy yet. But but it's very heavy, especially if you have like the good stuff. It's just like there's so much cheese and so much gravy, and you're just like, why? Why am I eating this?
Because it's good. That's
Because
why.
it's great.
Yeah, that's why. Okay. On that note, thank you guys so much for joining us. Where can people find the works of IllMuslims and each of you guys independently?
Everything's on Instagram at IllMuslims.
Right on.
IllMuslims on the gram, Facebook. I feel like we should probably set up a LinkedIn at this point.
All of it.
Just
IllMuslims.
You got an IllMuslims TikTok or what?
At IllMuslims.
Renegade. No, we don't.
Yes.
We're too old for that, I think.
Yeah.
I think
I think we would get
outside.
canceled quick on TikTok. But
Yeah.
having said that, shout out to at Illy on TikTok.
Okay.
Yeah, just at IllMuslims, and then I think for me it's just at Rummi Khan, everywhere. So from Gmail to LinkedIn to Instagram to Facebook, I got lucky. Nobody has this name, so except for this kid on TikTok who somehow has my name.
Rude.
Is he popping off or what?
No.
Oh.
We got
Oh, let's take him out. Let's take him out. Yeah. There can only be one. You
He's
know?
probably hating on you for having all the other handles.
Yo, my dude can fight me for it. But
I'd watch that. It's like a celebrity boxing match. The two Rummi Khans going at it. Be good times. All right.
over the account.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay. Thank you guys again. This was a pleasure. Appreciate it so much.
Yo, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Good.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Halal Gap. Join us in 2 weeks for our next guest, Adil Abadi. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok by searching Mosquers Film Festival. Thank you to our sound editor, Hamada Arafi, our tile artist, Narmeen Syed, our video editor, Arish Jamil, and our producer, Asif Qureshi. On behalf of Sikandar and myself, thank you for joining us. Catch you next time.